Yep. Our reference is horizontal, so we're going to have a horizontal composition. I'm prone to vertical compositions. You can use that later. I don't know why, I just like vertical compositions better, but this is a horizontal composition, so we're going to make it work for us. First thing we're going to do, we know that our paper is 9 by 12. This is a 5 by 7 picture, so it's not going to be exactly proportionate. As long as we are in the ballpark, gentlemen, we are fine. We're still going to use the same method that we use for our proportions. To block in the skull, block in the books, block in the crow, block in the mouse. That is the first thing that you will do when you draw. Block in. It saves time. It's good time management. When you're sitting there spending all this time on a skull and you have all this other stuff to do, it's not good. It's not good time management. Your deadline's coming up. Oh man, I just have my skull. That's all I've got done. Everything else is just blank. Block everything in. Go back and forth between things too. Well, I'm just not getting the shading on the skull. Alright, go try and do the shading on the crow or the book, something a little simpler. You start getting that muscle memory, that confidence to do it well. And hey, this trick works for the crow. It's gonna work for the skull too. Okay, start learning, start getting comfortable. Okay, blocking it in. No details when you block in, just shapes. So I'm looking at my skull. And I've got the edge of my paper here. Should probably put some other color than black so you guys can see it better. Alright, so I've got the edge of my skull. I'm using my drawing pencil. If you're using a mechanical pencil like me, it's basically your drawing pencil. So the edge of my skull is going to come about 1/2 inch. You can't see. Here's the edge of my paper, about 1/2 inch. The top of my skull, about 1/3 of the paper down, so 1, 2, somewhere in this ballpark, maybe a little lower. Draw big too. If you're drawing disproportionate, as long as you're drawing disproportionately big, you're blowing up, you're zooming in, that's good. If you draw to the point where you're zooming off the page, and I'll show you what that means here in a minute maybe, that's good. But if you're drawing super tiny, that is bad. You're not going to be able to get details. You're going to have to add a lot more materials when we get into our big still life drawings to fill your positive space requirements. Draw big. The bottom of my skull, if I go maybe 1/4 of an inch, a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. You got 1/2 inch over here, 1/4 of an inch down here. And then the edge of my skull over here on his left eye. If this is the center of my reference, it's a little off-centered. So here's the center of my paper roughly. If you want to measure, you can. Try and eyeball it. Try and get into a good feel of eyeballing it, then adapting. So there's the edge of my skull. Is this concept far beyond anybody yet? I don't get what you're doing with your measuring, Mr. B. Everyone's good? Hot diggity. Alright. So my skull is going to fit in here. I'm looking at the exterior angles, the shape of my skull. If I'm blurring my eyes, I don't see any details. You're not thinking about the eyes, you're not thinking about the nose, the teeth, anything. You're just thinking about this shape. It's a teardrop. It looks like a teardrop. I know I've got an angle here. From that point to that point. And it comes up. That point to that point. I'm not thinking about shapes. I'm not looking at the contours, that soft spot on the head, the back of the head. I'm just blocking in the shape. Comes up a little bit more vertical here. And out. Down. I'm looking at my chin, seeing where it lines up with the furthest part. So it's a little inside that part, so about here. I've got a bunch of lines. They're all really sketchy, so I can easily go back and erase. If you're being heavy-handed, you're putting dents into your paper, it's going to be a very, very hard thing to do to erase. So there's my teardrop. It's kind of like a pear. That is blocking in your skull. Some of you guys are going to feel compelled to go right into the teeth, go right into the eyes, block all that stuff in. Resist that temptation. Nothing's connected to the skull. That's my biggest object, so I'm going to start drawing the books. Now, if I'm looking at this skull that I drew versus the skull in my reference, I drew a little big. That's okay. Bigger is better. I'm going to have to adapt the right side of my drawing, I think. I'm going to block in the books as one. This is all one big cube. Okay? If I go straight up, if I'm looking at the furthest edge of my skull right here, the line that we went down, furthest into the paper, there's a little bit of space between the edge of my books. So I'm going to just draw that line. Then on my skull, the top line of my books, it's about here, roughly, straight across. The bottom line of my books, on my skull, line up kind of with the center of the teeth. Somewhere ballpark here. Okay. So now I can start breaking down my books individually. I know that there's a bit of an angle here. It's not too dramatic, so not too vertical. If I look at the top of the book, this line right here, so the side that's facing us, if I line it up on my skull, it'll be about the center of the skull. One book. And then this line mimics the line underneath it. Those angles are the same. One book. And I would have a straight line that goes across for the top of the book cover. I'm not going to go all the way across because I don't see it. I see a little bit of the book have this binding right here. I have another binding just inside of it, so straight up.